Welcome, everybody, to the Minions of the Zoo telecast for Tuesday evening. I'm your keeper this evening, Skep Tock, and with me I have Minion Serenity Star,
Arrow.
the Harry Channel.
Good evening.
So glad to be with both of you. It's been an exciting time at my homestead, what with harvesting beans and going through the canning process. You're constantly lifting heavy vats filled with water, and water is really heavy, especially when it's in a 16 quart vat of that's cast aluminum, giant
hmm
cast aluminum thing. And of course it's 390 degrees centigrade practically. Anyway, so that's been my life the last little bit. Serenity, what have you been doing for fun?
Hmm. Dealing with the garden, hiding in the house because it's 90 some odd degrees where I was during the day.
Mm.
So, yay!
Summer comes to West Virginia.
It's been here for a little bit, but it's always the humidity that's a bitch.
Yeah. How about you, Harry? What's new in your world?
Well, the weather was perfect. Um, Other than that, I've just been suffering from terrible sinus infection or something like that. So I actually took it easy today.
You're
I have done
allergic to
remarkably
California?
little. I'm allergic to everything.
Yeah.
I think I told you this story at one point. When I was a kid, somehow my mom was convinced that I was allergic to chocolate and
Hmm.
cured meats like hot dogs. And then after a year of being on an elimination diet that didn't do any good, they took me to an allergist and did that thing where they put irritants on your skin
Yeah,
with the
the
little
checkerboard
template.
test.
And so they did that and they tested me for all this different stuff. And it turned out I was allergic to pretty much everything except for chocolate and hot dogs. I discovered that carob coated raisins are not the worst thing in the world, but it's a damn good thing that I actually don't care that much about chocolate. I mean, I don't hate it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't tickle that spot in my brain that's next to sex that it seems to affect some people with, where it's like,
Right.
you know, do you need to be alone? It's like
Yeah.
if you and chocolate like each other so much, why don't you marry it and say, shut up? But people do get really, really excited about chocolate. And luckily I'm not one of those people. So it was a rough year, but I made it through. No, I'm actually allergic to a ton of stuff. I had this this doctor briefly back in the 90s, and this woman had a lab. Well, essentially, she had all kinds of lab equipment in her office, so that if you gave her an opportunity to do like anything, oh, you have allergies. Well, we should definitely take some of your blood and figure out what your antigens are, and figure out what all your allergies are. Oh, we can just run this blood test. It's fine. I go, wow, that sounds really great compared to what I did when I was a kid. Oh, it'll be fine. We can just do it here. We don't even have to need to send it out to a lab. Great. $5,000 later, I'm, I'm getting messages from from my insurance company saying we don't think we can have her be your doctor anymore if you want us to pay. Oh, okay.
Wow.
That does explain that Rolex that she's wearing and the gold
Yeah.
Mercedes that she's driving around. She's a really good doctor, but she, you'd go in there and it would be, why are you giving a 30-year-old an EKG? Why, why are you doing all this stuff? I mean, you're just constantly like random esoteric tests. Yeah, she made a lot of money while she could and retired early. I'm fairly sure she had quite the racket.
Yeah, it sounds like a lab racket to me, actually. And that's something that's a problem with physicians that insurance companies tend to be cracking down on too.
As well they
You know,
should.
yeah.
Well, we spend enough money on people sort of in the last 6 months of their life, just doing all kinds of medical intervention. Um,
Yep. 70% of the cost of any ER is uh, in the last 11 days of life, I believe, is the popular statistic.
Yeah. So if you end up with government health care, socialized medicine, don't think for a second, there may not be death boards, but there will be the functional equivalent of death boards. They will
With respect
decide.
to the length of your life, you and the government do not have a community of interest. You do not share a community of interest.
No,
That's how they get you. That's how they get you.
it is how they get you. Well, okay, this touches on a topic that I've thought about a bunch of times, and I'm curious what Serenity thinks about it. I've been thinking about, in the broader sense, things like monuments, and I kind of feel like there is a type of social contract or an aspect of it that exists that we say we're going to do things like we're going to honor our veterans, we're going to honor our elders, we're going to honor our founders, all these people who do stuff before, and people go to their grave thinking that their accomplishments, their statues, their awards, those are all going to basically stand the test of time. And I think it provides some amount of comfort. And I also think that people work hard to earn honors because they believe it's going to amount to something. And this is part of why I really don't like this recasting of history and values that seems to be going on. And I don't like it when we don't treat our veterans well, because I feel like we're not living up to our part of the social contract. I mean, I've even said in the case of like immigrants and stuff, people say, well, you don't own this country. Well, the people who built this country built it because they wanted their descendants to have a better life than they did, not necessarily because they wanted to take on the world's problems. So I do kind of feel like it's important for future generations that we honor the promises we made to our past generations. It's kind of just, maybe it's one of my more traditional thoughts, but I don't know. What do you think?
The thing is, I have a lot of people in my family who are military. They're either basic military or they're Rangers. And like people in my family, like if it wasn't for the fact that because we're generations upon generations of like some of us are military or at least military adjacent. So we've grown up. So we're completely aware of the fact that going into the military, you can do great things. You can get an education, do all this kind of stuff. But we're also aware of the fact that the government doesn't really give a shit about you once you get out. That's proven by how the VA treats people, because the VA is terrible. At least in my neck of the woods, the VA is terrible.
She's not wrong.
And the fact that we have to have stuff like the Wounded Warrior Project and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I wish we would keep the social contract up. I wish we would take care of it. Like, I would not have a problem with universal health care if the VA was run properly. But they can't even run the VA properly, and that's not even that large of a population that they can't even do properly. So why would I trust them to run a 300 million people plus kind of thing? But it's like, it's something that my great-grandfather said. My great-grandfather is the one who ran from Germany on the last boat out before they shut everything down because of the Nazis. And he's like, because they were destroying everything that anybody who had any kind of history with Germany had. And he was just like, he always had the stance of, it's a lovely thought that anyone's going to respect what you've done, what you fought for, whatever's gone on in your life. He's like, but it's most of the time, most of them don't actually care. You'll have a very small part of the population who care, and then everybody else is either going to use it to try to make themselves look better, or they're going to try to use what you did in the worst possible light, in the worst possible way to control everybody else, so this way they can make themselves seem like the superior being. He's like, that's just the way it is. I care more about trying to help and protect the people I can, but it's something you have to accept the fact. And he was very candid with the people in my family who went into the military, went into the cops, firefighters, whatever, when it came to that. Anything that was a public service thing, he was very clear with them. It's like, you have to accept the fact that most of these people are going to forget you the minute you're out of their line of sight. There just are. And that we are inherently, not everybody, but a good portion of people are inherently selfish. And once that they no longer need you, they don't care. And they will just let you sit there and just waste away and disappear from their lives, and it doesn't matter to them. And it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I truly do wish we would take better care of veterans, but I honestly, we never have. No country ever has. So I don't think it's ever going to happen. It's a nice
I don't
idea.
know if never. I don't know if never is the correct thing. My grandfather was military, and he was treated pretty well by the VA.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as a problem back. When I was a kid, I knew people who were able to go to military hospitals and stuff, and they were pretty well treated. It was a decent system in the 1980s.
Military hospitals were fine.
Yeah.
The ones that were on base were fine. The ones run by the VA used to be better than they are now. But as the bureaucracy built up, it's become sclerotic, basically.
I'm only taking issue with the word never, because Serenity used the word never, and I'm not sure that never is correct. I think, and that's actually worse, because what it means is if we never did it, then we can just be cynical about it, right? We never took care of them. Mm-hmm. What would anybody expect? But I kind of feel like things have gotten a lot worse in the last 30 years from what I can see. Things like the VA in Palo Alto was a pretty decent facility in the 80s and the 70s. Yep. It wasn't always like this. And in terms of a lot of people would get out of the military, take the education with them, get out of the military, put in their time, get a pension, and then start their second career, whatever that career was. And then have a really nice retirement between having, if they served in wartime, they would have medical benefits, they would have their, one or two pensions. Life was pretty damn good for a lot of these people. And it just doesn't feel like that's the case so much anymore. At least in terms of the VA thing, we can look at it. I mean, you can still earn a military pension, but...
Well, I'm going off the Vietnam vets that are in my family and how shit they were treated from the word go, from their own mouths, from just coming back and getting spit on for something they had no control over. Like, I had family members who actually got spit on, like, coming home from the airports.
Oh, you're talking about reception of people. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then they come home and they have... Now, when after Vietnam happened, I understand they didn't have as much on psychology. I get that. But I have cousins who lived years in agony until they finally died from limbs they lost. And no one ever listened to them. That's the thing. Like, the VA didn't listen to them. They didn't try to get them, like, the amount of phantom limb pain some of my family members have had they didn't try to do anything. And that's what I can only go off my family's experience and how I've watched some of them even toward the end of their life. Cause like it's West Virginia. Like, we have an opioid problem, and I saw some family members self-medicate. Some of them we were able to get them out of that, and some of them we weren't, and they died very horrible, lonely, painful deaths. And many of them, even while they were trying to self-medicate, were still trying to get any kind of help from either the government or the VA, and it never happened. And yeah, they had a pension. Pension don't mean shit if they can't have some kind of quality of life. Like, that's where I come from with this, is like, to me, that's how it feels, because Vietnam was because there was a lot of guys in my family. Like, I'm one of the few females born into the family. Mostly everyone else is there's a lot of guys. And even back during my mom's generation, like, so a lot of them went into Vietnam either because they were there right before Vietnam started, and they were just trying to get basically what happened with the Gulf War. They were just going into the military to try to get, like, GI Bill, not the GI Bill, but get, like, pension build up and then get out and all this kind of stuff. And then Vietnam happened, and then they had to go deal with that, and Vietnam fucked with their heads. Like, I've had several cousins commit suicide. Gulf War, thankfully, and Desert Fox and Desert Storm, all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, when they came back from that, the family was a little bit more prepared to deal with it. But even then, we still fighting with the VA to get them to any kind of help, to make sure they got checked when they were supposed to. all this kind of stuff. And the VA was useless. The government was useless. That's the reason why it feels like never to me, because it just feels like the government's never cared. Once they've served their purpose, you're no longer of use, get out. That's what it always feels like.
I suspect there are types of problems that the VA is better at handling than others. I think
Yeah.
if you go in and you've got like a problem and there's a solution, like problem solution, they know how to deal with that. If you talk
If you
about
break your arm, they can set your arm.
if you break their arm, they can set your arm, but if you break your spirit, they don't know what to do with that.
Well, I understand the spirit part, but it was like they were having pain issues.
Well, I understand, but it's like if you get into a chronic pain situation where, well, what are we going to do about the chronic pain? I think the VA clearly has a really hard time with that sort of stuff now. I don't know what it was like before, but you're talking about phantom limbs and things. I don't know if the VA has ever been good at helping those types of things. You know, they'll give you a hearing aid, they'll give you a cast. You know, they might even give you a stent or a bypass surgery. But I think there's also the VA thing. I mean, we both agree that it's terrible now.
Yeah.
And it's certainly been terrible in the past on many occasions. Even if you go back to Rome, you would fight for the empire, and in return you'd get salt or some land or money. You know, you would be compensated for that, but you knew that if you fought for the empire, you would get rewarded. That's always been the case going like since forever. You know, we're supposed to have a deal with soldiers. You fight valiantly for your country. And we recognize that even foreigners who fight for the US, that was a path to citizenship. I learned a lot doing tax returns for like one season because I was trying to find a part-time job, because I got to meet a whole bunch of different people from all kinds of different parts of life, like the husband and wife. I'm sorry?
Really opens your eyes.
It sure does. It was extreme. It was a very good thing to do when I was like 20 years old. And I met like this one gentleman who was born in the Philippines, fought for the US in World War II, and then, you know, got his citizenship that way. And of course, the English have made deals like this for a long time. That's why there's so many Sikhs in the UK. Those people earned their place there. You know,
yes,
because
indeed.
they did what needed to be done when it needed to be done. And they also picked the winning side, which was smart.
Yeah, they're not a bunch of sulking Pakistanis who think the world owes them a living.
Yeah, but my general thesis is there are people who say that we don't owe anything to previous generations. We shouldn't be bound by the past when we make decisions about the present. And I think that in a lot of ways that's a terrible, terrible idea, because what you're doing is you're telling the people now that we're not going to give a crap about them in the future.
Yeah,
It's sort of like marrying your mistress and then the mistress being surprised when she gets dumped for the next mistress. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen?
I think there's a fine line between respecting the past and respecting what other people have done and letting it control. And I think too many people make the mistake of intertwining the two and thinking that just respecting and acknowledging past and learning from the past, or standing on the shoulders of giants, basically, is a bad thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I also don't think it should ever control things either. But there's a lot of people who either by choice or by their own arrogance equate the two, and they don't know how to tell the difference between the two. Like, I don't agree with anything. I don't agree with slavery, but slavery brought money to this country when we need it, and then it was slowly starting to die out anyway because of the cotton gin. And a lot of the people who fought for the South weren't actually slave people. Some of them were abolitionists, but they were fighting for the South because it wasn't entirely about slavery. Like, I respect the knowledge of that and understanding of that, and I don't think their statues should be torn down, because that needs to be learned and remembered. It's kind of like when everybody was tearing down all the statues during the Summer of Peace, and it's like, oh, you're celebrating this. No, it's this way we remember what happened, because so many people don't want. It's the comment I've made several times when people say, "Well, I didn't learn that in school." Okay, did you not? Was it not taught, or were you just not paying attention? And that's the problem, is that a lot of people don't pay attention. Like, and that was proven by. Correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes my brain flips people. But was it Robert E. Lee who married an abolitionist?
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna have to look it up. But I remember one of.
We need Prospero.
I know.
Yeah, well.
Uh,
Was that the show on the History Channel with the ghosts? Or the
probably.
Yeah. I love what the History Channel's turned into, you know, ghosts of the American Civil War.
I think he did marry an abolitionist, and he knew she was an abolitionist. Like, this wasn't something like he didn't know. And it's the whole fact of, like, people are more than just one thing. Even these people, like, people can do bad things, and there's still more than that one thing. That doesn't mitigate the bad stuff they did, but at the same time, it's like, you also have to look at it from their point of view. The South was being told that their opinion didn't matter on stuff, and you had a lot of old families and stuff like that. But anyway, it's just this whole fact of, like, statues, paintings, old documents, everything, no matter who it comes from, kind of needs to be there, because some people legitimately just don't pay attention, and maybe one day someone will see a statue, go, who is that, look it up, and go, oh, okay, let's not do that again. And go on from there. And it's kind of, it's everything. So many people don't want to actually, they want to, it's kind of like the whole thing on, like, every piece of social media. Everybody wants to blame their parents for their trauma. And there's like every, like, dime store psychologist on social media going, well, if you're an introvert, or it's because your parents treated you like this. If you were told that you were a more adult, more mature for your age, it was because you always had to do stuff, so that's your parents' fault. It's like, okay, I'm not going to let it control my life. That may be a good thing, but I'm not going to listen to someone who hasn't talked to me. Like, everybody's so willing to take the easy way out that no one wants to actually, that a lot of people, not no one, because a lot of people aren't, but there's a lot of people out there who just want to blame everybody else, want to blame history for stuff, want to blame their parents for stuff, blame their grandparents for stuff, and they aren't willing to just go, well, it ends with me, let's see what I can do, and let's not actually stomp all over people who've not done anything wrong, because it's not fair to them. So stop it.
Yeah. People do not have a particularly nuanced view of history.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like Mein Kampf still sold.
It's true.
Anarchist Cookbook, stuff by Stalin and all them. Like, it's like, and you want to tear down statues of people?
Well, the Khmer Rouge were perfectly happy to tear down everything except for, gosh, I can't remember that one ancient city, because they sort of knew that without that, I cannot remember the name. Was it Angkor Wat? I think
you're right. I think it's Angkor Wat.
Without that was such a piece of the national identity that they knew that they wouldn't touch it. They guarded that. Everything else they just basically wiped out.
Yeah.
Because that's the way those kinds of revolutions work. When you're tearing down all the existing structures to replace them with the new hotness, you can't let pesky things like the past get in your way. Another reason why I think it's important to know your place in history. Like, if somebody wanted to have a real conversation about reparations,
Yeah.
I'm perfectly willing to admit that that there were people who were brought here. They were a significant portion of the population. Not that big a portion. So the idea that the entire country was built on the backs of black slaves and their descendants is a preposterous notion. I can show you lots of pictures of poor white people who work their asses off. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of hardworking people in your state's history.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that claiming that black people didn't, that slaves and their descendants specifically didn't contribute would be ridiculous. Obviously, they did. A lot. And in many cases, doing jobs other people didn't want to do. But there were also lots of white people doing jobs that nobody else wanted to do, too. I mean, this country was built by a lot of different people.
What?
I'm more than prepared to have a nuanced conversation. The problem is any system for reparations you come up with is just it takes about 3 questions to watch it fall apart, to become inconsistent.
Yeah.
Unless
I mean,
it's
it's
just,
all,
you're racist, money please. That's pretty much the extent of the arguments
yeah.
for it.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things like cotton had a hand in America, but the thing that actually made us is we have one of the best freight rail systems in the world. And that was built by Irish, Chinese, Native Americans, and some blacks, but they weren't slaves at the time that it was built. Like that was
Mhm.
those were the big ones. And it's like, so if you actually want to talk about contributions and reparations, we also have to
A
talk about
lot of
reparations.
recently freed slaves.
Yeah. So it's like if we're
That's a
going to talk,
great. That's really a great point.
and it's like if we're going to talk about reparations, we need to talk about reparations to them too for the actual stuff. Because I remember, oh Lord, it was years ago. There was a mini series. I think it was on CB back when the letter channels on not even cable, just basic TV used to do like mini series,
Mhm.
and they had one. It
Mhm.
was called, I think it was called Old West or something like that, and it followed different storylines of different people, and it followed like one guy who was going to go on to be a big politician, and it followed another guy who had nothing and went out west to find his money, and he ended up being one of the people who worked on the railroad. And they made it a very big point with that movie to show there were Native Americans working on it, there were black people, there were Chinese, the fact that all of them were basically treated like second class citizens on top of what the Irish were treated like. And if anybody in the local towns found out you were Irish, they would subjugate you back to with the other people. Like, and this was going on well into the 20th century because the Irish cop joke that's in a lot of old movies.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things where it's kind of like there's an unwillingness to accept the fact that you're not of that by a certain group of people, that they were not the only ones to suffer. And it's like, I understand where you're coming from, guys, but you if we're really going to talk about the thing that changed America, that made the biggest difference, it's going to be the rail system. It's going to be up there. It's a little bit higher than cotton. Just putting that out there. I'm not saying it excuses the slave trade, but considering the fact that the rail system in the North is part of the deciding factor in the Civil War, at least that's what I remember from my history class. They said it was part of the deciding factor. And that was not built by slavery. That was built by the 3 other groups that I named, the Irish, the Chinese, and the Native Americans, and just random workers who came from other countries. I think it was built by a lot of Poles too, Polish people.
Yeah,
And
lots of people built lots of things.
yeah, and
Nobody
it's
gets to claim the claim that America was built by slaves and their descendants, and that somehow that's like a persuasive argument. It's like lots of people built lots of things. I mean,
yeah,
the point being that there are all sorts of good and bad episodes in American history.
oh yeah,
And I think it's important to remember history, but I'm specifically, like I said, interested in how we treat the past influencing how people view their current contributions toward the future. I mean, this is like I said, it's very much just like respecting your elders. It's a
yeah.
good system. It really is a good system. You want to raise young people to respect their elders.
Mm-hmm.
And then someday they'll grow into being elders, and you just kind of pay it forward. Because I don't see us having a cohesive society if we just tear every single thing down and then try to build utopia. I think it's important to have some kind of anchor to the past. So if somebody wants to talk about reparations, I can have a real conversation about
Yeah.
horrible things that happened. I mean, we did terrible things to the Native Americans in a lot of
Oh yeah.
cases.
Yeah,
There's
if you
plenty
want
of
to start
grievance.
yeah, there are plenty of places to pay reparations. We've harmed all kinds of groups of people, and if you pay reparations for one group of people, you're going to have to pay it for another. And the other thing is that um, as bad as black people have been treated in this country, and being a slave, that's about as bad as it can get. It still pales in comparison to what we did to the Indians, to what we did to the Native Americans. That was
Yeah, I think.
just
Yeah.
that
Sorry,
was
go
that
ahead.
was that was fucked up.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are really terrible things that happen to some Africans, and I'm sure there are really terrible things that happen to some Native Americans. I think on the whole, the Native Americans got a pretty raw deal. And bingo and casinos don't really make up for all of it. But the point
No, it
being,
doesn't.
we can't just pay reparations to everybody. I
That
think
is that's not a broad wealth distribution item that if tr- having 3% of the population drive Cadillacs and the rest of them left in squalor, third world squalor, basically, is not a success story.
Well, there's also the
no.
fact that some of the Native American stuff, I feel like they're also focusing a lot at the wrong group. Now, the American government did do bad stuff later than Native Americans, but if we're going all the way back to colonization, they kind of also need to go after the French, the Germans, and the English because they're the ones who started the shit. But yeah, it's like, I mean, it's the argument that's brought up, at least by the people I follow on Tumblr a lot. It's like, a lot of bad people have done a lot of bad things to a lot of people around the world. Every civilization has done that. You can't expect every group to pay every other group back to people. It's like there's a certain point when you just have to go, you know what? The past is the past. We're going to make sure we learn it to make sure we don't repeat it, but we can't expect because it's the whole fact of like, what amount of money is enough? What amount of land is enough? When are you going to say it's enough? Are you going to go back on it later when it doesn't end up going the way you want it to go?
If they think they can get more money out of it, yeah. The people who
Yeah.
drive a lot of the stuff, the noisy, unsatisfied people who will always just want as much as they can get. It's
Yeah.
just a bargaining position.
Oh, yeah. And that's the
You know.
thing that kind of annoys me is like, you can't, there's no apology that's ever going to be enough because we're not apologizing to the action because the people who did it are not apologizing to the people it was done to. No amount of money is ever going to be enough because it's just not. Because
Well, just consider the basic intellectually bankrupt idea behind reparations. A bunch of people who never discriminated against anybody are going to pay a bunch of their money to a bunch of people who were never discriminated against by the payers of the money. That's just absolute nonsense.
It's like it's the whole fact of like the joke online is always, okay, anybody who has blood relation to a slave owner needs to pay reparations. A lot of the African American community are going to find how many of them are related to slave owners, but it's like that.
By the way, Serenity, I did want to confirm you were absolutely right.
Which one?
Excuse me. Mary Custis Lee, Robert E. Lee's wife, was the daughter of Molly Custis, who strangely is a distant cousin of mine. But
well,
anyway,
I think they were also related.
It's neither here nor that's neither here nor there. Molly Custis was the first of the abolitionists in the Custis family, and her daughter Mary followed in. She used to go to her mother's meetings of abolitionist society meetings that American Colonization Society. That's what it was called.
Yeah.
And that was an organization that advocated the emancipation and resettlement of freed slaves in Africa.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, and this is speaking to like history. Like, I love Williamsburg in Virginia, like the Living Museum, and that was where I remember being told about it because they are very open about slavery and its place in the New World and what happened, but they also don't make it the only thing they talk about, and they talk about everybody, and they try to be as fair as they possibly can. And I remember that's where I heard it, was them talking about he married an abolitionist and he was actually against slavery, but it was because he fought. And and as far as I know from people I know who've gone to Williamsburg recently, they still keep that stance. Like they are trying very, very hard to keep, contrary to what their social media says, because you can't trust things social media because most of it's BS. They're trying to stay very, very neutral, which is their whole point. It's the reason why none of the characters that people play are race changed. which is another thing I've always respected, because Black people are historians and do the roles that they would have done back then. But they're also very open about, like, this is what slavery was like. This is what slavery was like when the New World was first founded. This is what it was like during Williamsburg's time. This has Ben Franklin. But it's like, I like those kinds of things because they, whether you were taught it or not, they can fill in the blanks. And I think people learn a lot easier that way. But I'd like history to be remembered that way, like how they do it. But I know it's not possible with a lot of things. Because, yeah. But,
yeah.
It's like, I know on Tumblr, because I checked it out, like, I learned stuff from Tumblr about America's involvement in World War II, about how it's the way it's portrayed, but it's also very, they actually backed it up with actual, like, bibliography at the bottom of actual
Where I get all my pronouns. Yeah.
Hey, man, I follow some smart people on Tumblr. Thank you. But they were talking about the involvement in the war. They were also very open. They talked about how Russia had a hand in it, but Stalin at that point had destroyed most of the Russian army, because it's Stalin. He was a communist. So it's one of those things, like, but it's I just wish that people who rage about history and rage about past transgressions that they've never actually had to witness or deal with in their entire life would actually read history, but then they would be seen as being wrong, and they can't do that. Because I think on some part of them knows that they're going to be found wrong. So they don't read into it, because then they can just claim ignorance. I swear to God, that's what it is sometimes. Yeah, without the Lend-Lease, yeah. I read they have, like, it was like 6 pages long on the Lend-Lease stuff that America did. It's like, and they give details of the trucks we sent, everything. I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But I like, it's one of those things where it's like anything. Like, what's the line? Like, how, because you can't force people to learn. It'd be lovely, but that could also go very bad, because who decides what people learn? Who controls what they learn? How much do they learn? What viewpoint do they learn from? That kind of stuff. And that's when it gets dangerous too, because it's like, because as we've seen,
we've always relied on our educators to do that even-handedly, and to faithfully educate our children, according to a particular plan to achieve certain levels of education at the end of the course of study.
Well, there's a system. And the way the system is supposed to work is it should be, if you have academic freedom, bad teachers become a lot less of a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always going to be some sharp young person who wants to be recognized, who wants to stand out from the flock, who wants to be one of the 20s in the 80-20 Pareto distribution. Yes. There's always going to be, so if the teacher says something that's just patently stupid, there's going to be some sharp guy who's going to, call him on it. Because all the girls will think a little bit more of him, and all the guys will think he's just a little bit cooler. And the fact that we are social animals works to our advantage when we set the system up correctly. I'm not particularly concerned about bad teachers. One of the best history teachers I ever had was a communist. And he would bring up all kinds of stuff that wasn't really in the history book. Made it a much more interesting class. Yeah. Because it wasn't just a dry recitation of names and dates. You actually got to have debates in class. Because, of course, I want to be liked, so I'm going to challenge him on stuff. Not to mention I have no particular love for communists, so I'm going to challenge him on stuff. It was a good system, and I think as long as you have academic freedom, I think that everything will work out okay. Bad teachers are the least of your problems. I think getting rid of academic freedom is terrible. Yeah. And this is part of where I think Serenity and I kind of disagree about tenure. Yeah, it is a flawed system because they can just sit on their ass and do nothing once they get tenure. But the purpose of tenure is supposedly to encourage that academic freedom. You kind of have
wish-
to be careful about who you give tenure to.
Well,
It can't
that's
just be
my
forced matriculation.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
my thing. Like, I just wish it was better.
I would actually argue that tenure may have been gamed by the wokesters, because even if a professor has tenure, if he makes a sin of woke, of type woke, if he offends the wrong people, says the wrong thing, it doesn't matter if they have tenure. They can still be thrown out of the university, and the demand will be that they be thrown out. And the universities have shown no spine that I've seen, very little spine, very little spinal reveals on standing by their professors and their freedom to express themselves. And because the idea behind tenure is that you have the academic freedom, you have the freedom to be wrong, you have the freedom to be controversial, you have the freedom to take unusual approaches in the hope of advancing your field. And a lot of research is very strange the way it develops, the way that the ideas collide, and you need to have that anything goes aspect to the to doing academic research at the university level. I think.
Yeah, Assassin of the Greys had very different experience than I've had. I actually took a class. I'm trying not to dox myself here too badly. It was a what do I call this class without giving it away? Well, anyway, it was a class on modern politics, and it was from a somewhat famous leftist who was a retired politician, a pretty big name. And it was a class with about 800 people in it, and there were 3 conservatives who took the class. Me, the guy who was the head of the campus Republicans, and this Young American for Freedom guy, some YAF guy. And I basically sat with these 2 guys, one on each side of me, in the front row center, right in front of the lectern, with 800 people behind me. And I would regularly challenge this guy. But, I mean, I was respectful. I viewed it, this was back when politics was a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And I did fine in that class, and I challenged him all the time. I challenged the whole class a bunch of times. There were definitely times when I was very careful about how I left campus after that, because I thought that I might be at least hassled by a crowd. But you learn a lot about yourself when you stand when you've got basically the teacher and 897 people who all disagree with you in a room, and you can still say what it is you actually think. I mean, I don't claim to be the bravest person ever, but I think it was a pretty character-building activity to take that class. And it helped me become a much better debater than I was before that. And it gave me a lot of confidence knowing that, that I could stand my ground in front of a crowd like that.
Especially with people like just boring
I can
just
just
lasers
imagine.
at the back of your head.
Yeah.
It's like, don't look at them, don't look at them.
This guy again. With his with his logic and his reason,
This asshole.
They got very, very angry at me. Not the teacher, but the students got very, very angry at me on a few occasions.
Stop with your hate facts.
Oh, they were talking about lookism one time. Lookism is wrong. And I think I did a pretty good job of making the point that, an employer actually may have a vested interest in you not looking like a freak show.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a terribly hard argument to win, but when you're a lot younger and feeling intimidated by the angry set of eyes looking at you, it is a good lesson. But I've been at the center of large numbers of people disagreeing with me on more than one occasion.
How so?
Well, I was in a driver's ed class one time, and of course, driver's ed is like the most jerk-off class that's ever existed in high school.
Oh, that's an easy one.
I mean, it really is, because there's like 2 or 3 people in the simulator trying not to pretend they're going to crash the cars and stuff. And
Oh, you
then
had a simulator?
it's yeah, they actually had a simulator. I mean, I
Oh,
never
really?
used it, but they had one.
We actually drove in real cars, but anyway, sorry.
And I think I had a book, which was God, I think it was Why I'm Not a Christian by Bertrand Russell, and I wasn't like showing it off. It was just in a stack of books that I had, and it was a book that I was reading at the time, and this didn't go over well with the largely Christian group in the school. But you
Yeah.
haven't really experienced school, being on the receiving end of a lot of social pressure until you've got 57 people asking you questions. And you have to learn very quickly that if you're going to argue with people about something, you need to be respectful and logical and not try to be a dick and not try to score points. The first thing you want to do is try to sort of establish some kind of common understanding, some kind of common framework. When you're dealing with people who aren't arguing with you honestly, there's not much you can do about it. And you need to identify those people right away and disengage. But I think it's good to be an outcast sometimes. I think social pressure is good. I think people should tell you not to have a mullet, and people should pressure you to do the right things. Like, like if you get your girlfriend pregnant, maybe you should actually marry her and take care of the kid and do that kind of stuff. I think social pressure is good. I really do. But I think it's also important that if you want to be part of the 20% and not the 80%, if you want to occasionally be a leader, you better learn to stand your ground and make your position and not waver. And I think that's a really good lesson for people. Being challenged is good. The trick is knowing when you're supposed to acquiesce and when you're supposed to keep standing your ground.
Well,
Yes.
also when to also not to let the fact that you're wrong make you angry, because it sucks. Being wrong sucks, but you also have to realize that it's not
I'm
the
wrong
end of
all the time.
world.
I'm seriously, I totally embrace being wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I'm totally fine with admitting it. It really throws people off, especially like in a business setting, because I will freely admit that if I make a mistake on something.
Yeah.
I've told people who worked for me that the fastest way to get fired is to lie about a mistake to cover it up.
Yeah. Especially in the line of work that you have. If you have a mistake, don't lie about it.
I think it doesn't matter what, I think just about any line of work, the last thing you want is people lying about mistakes they make. It's okay to make mistakes. It's really bad to cover them up because you just make them worse. Hey, another person showed up.
Yeah.
Hey-o.
Howdy.
How's everybody doing?
He's good. Well, I'm good.
Oh, I'm just philosophizing or, I don't know. just so
Only
much
make
mental
you
masturbation. Well, I mean,
I'm old and mean.
I am proud of myself for standing my ground on more than a few occasions. I think it's a good thing because it doesn't come to me naturally. I have to force myself to do it because, like a lot of people, I want to be liked and I don't want to cause trouble. But
all human
sometimes
beings.
you got to, yeah.
Some people make it easy to stand up to.
Well, I think I learned my lesson early because I know when I was a kid, occasionally something would come up and somebody'd say, you need to do this thing. And I really don't want to. And they said, no, you got to do it. It's super important. You got to do it. And then I found through experience, when you keep track of these things, you keep track of your mistakes, that a lot of times listening to people and giving in is the wrong thing to do. So there was this 6th grade science camp, and I didn't want to go to 6th grade science camp because it sounded dumb. Not that I don't like science. I didn't want to go to 6th grade science camp. So I said, I'm not going to do it. And so all these people, including my kindergarten teacher, comes over and says, you really got to do this because if you don't go, you're going to totally regret it. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret not going to this thing. It's like they did this full court press because the deal was, stay back. You can just do your homework. Just show up and we'll lock you in the library and you can just do your homework and that'll be fine. Or you can go to this thing that I didn't want to go to. And so I got pressured into doing this thing and I go, and it turns out during all this, something happened that I would have found amazing because I had a telescope set up with like all the solar observing stuff and, the stuff that you get when you're a kid, not the expensive stuff. And there was an eclipse. And instead of us observing the eclipse at science camp, they locked us in our cabins until it was over.
What?
And I didn't have any interest in any of the newts and wildlife and other bullshit at science camp. The only science thing that happened, I didn't get to see. And the only reason I didn't get to see it is because I wasn't there. I wasn't at home with my telescope. I was so pissed. And from that moment forward, when people try to pressure me to do something, there's this voice in the back of my head that says, remember 6th grade science camp, you idiot. Don't fucking give in to these people because you're going to regret it. Ever since 6th grade science camp, it's like, don't tell me what to do. I know what, just shut up. True story.
That's wonderful. You've got your own intellectual remember the main moment.
Exactly. And there have been other things that have happened since then, much more important things that have happened since then. But it all started with that one event.
That's right. It scarred you for life.
It did.
Yeah.
Harry never forgot.
One of the things that I think has determined or has hastened the coarsening of public discourse is the attitude between opposing sides that the other side doesn't deserve the truth from them, and that they're justified in doing anything, including formulating blatant lies, blatant, obvious 180 degrees from reality lies, because the other side does not deserve to be dealt with honestly. That contempt poisons public debate. That's what poisons public debate. We've got to stop hating each other. We've got to inculcate in these people. Let me try and understand your side of things. Everybody needs to say that. Everybody should say that anyway about everything, in my opinion. Let me try and understand where you're coming from. Let me, what are your concerns? What fundamental assumptions and values do we disagree on? Most people don't disagree on the objective. People just disagree on the means. But until we can have an at least polite discussion where people can be taken at their word to be representing the truth as best they know it, instead of this take down the other side at any cost. I really do think that's what's wrong with public discourse right now. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Skep. I just thinking back within my own family, certain family members of mine that seem to be really enthralled with the book "The Cruelty Is the Point" right now, which I haven't read, but I have a feeling I have an idea of what's in it. It's about how terrible Trump supporters are, and the title is kind of, I think, gives away the game as far as the ideology of the writer, and I got into a discussion with my
Is this
brother.
the one by
one
Adam
time.
Stewart?
I think so, yeah. And we were talking about the abortion debate. It was right after the thing was leaked, and I'm sitting here going, okay, well, there isn't a really broad agreement amongst pro-life people of what to do next, and because he was in full sky is falling doomsday mode, and still is. And I was like, look, here's this article by David French, who's been in the pro-life business for a long, long time, and knows lay of land. Just calm down. The sky's not falling. But he wasn't having it, and he's like, no, there is no. The Republican Party is, well, it's just own the libs, and it's all about cruelty, and it's all about this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just like, how do you know that?
Well, in fairness, the Republicans are getting just as bad as the Democrats. I'm not going to say they got there first. I think the Democrats got there first, but the Republicans are joining them down in the sewer. This change needs to take place on both sides.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the Democrats will step over the line, and then the Republicans will be like holding my beer and try to outdo them almost.
Right. So, yeah, I was looking at this blurb on the book that you're talking about reading. It says, to many, our most shocking political crises appear unprecedented, un-American even. But they are not, writes the Atlantic's Adam THUR in this prescient essay collection, which dissects the most devastating moments in recent memory to reveal deeply entrenched dynamics, patterns as old as the country itself. January 6th insurrection, anti-immigrant sentiment, and American authoritarianism all have historic roots. They explain their continued power with or without President Donald Trump, a fact borne out by what has happened since his departure from the White House. This guy's just completely deluded. So
that sounds like
he says that
that's
Trump
like some of the sermon books, Skep.
Huh?
That sounds like a collection of sermons, Skep.
Yeah, it probably. He says that Trump is not the cause; he is a symptom. And his phrase, "the cruelty is the point," became among the most used descriptions of Trump's era. But as this book demonstrates, it resonates across centuries. The essays here combine revelatory reporting, searing analysis, and a clarity that's bracing, I'll bet. In this new expanded version of his best-selling debut, THUR elegantly dissects white supremacy's profound influence on our political system, looking at the persistence of the lost cause, the past and present of police unions, the mythology of migration, and the many faces of anti-Semitism. In so doing, he offers abundant proof that our past is present and demonstrates the devastating costs of continuing to pretend it's not. The cruelty is the point, dares us, the reader, to not look away.
Hang on, let me go get my migraine medicine. My goodness. I better pick it up.
Adam THUR looks like the admiral from Star Wars.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, the kind of fish-looking guy.
Oh, Akbar? Admiral.
Yeah.
And there he went.
Yeah.
It's a trap.
And he's gone.
I'm sure. Yeah, robot and gone. He'll be back.
It's a trap. Admiral Akbar.
So, another liberal tome.
Well, tomes are great, but you know, there's so much great stuff on YouTube. You can go back and watch Saul Alinsky being interviewed by, you know, Phil Donahue, or you know, there's all these great things. There's great little bite-sized pieces of history that are there. You know, you can find out all you need to know about rules for radicals by just watching William F. Buckley talk to Alinsky. You don't have to read rules for radicals. We're really blessed with having huge amounts of information readily available in easily digestible bite-sized form.
There are worse educations than watching firing line episodes, just wall to wall.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly one of my all-time favorite shows.
Absolutely. It's certainly one of mine.
Read a lot of National Review growing up.
Yeah. Say I subscribed for 25 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Buckley was quite the character. Very East Coasty, which was a little off-putting in some ways, but you had to respect the guy's intelligence, and it was nice that he was thoughtful. I like his guest appearances on Laugh-In. Very civilized, even though obviously the crowd was, the cast was very lefty, and you know, obviously some of it was somewhat scripted. It was still very respectful and very funny. You know, everybody got their little zingers in, and everybody was sort of very gracious about it. So a show like Laugh-In, even as lefty, hippie, progressive as it was socially, you know, you could still have Richard Nixon come on and go, you know, sock it to me. It was great.
So, sock it to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird dichotomy. because I was thinking about, you know, Harry was talking about like things that kind of formed him in his youth. You know, my screen name is a Star Wars reference and a BattleTech reference. And way back when I was 13 years old, scrawny little kid, I picked up, you know, it's one of those like cheapo grocery store novels. And the title of it was Tactics of Duty, and it has two giant robots shooting at each other. And I thought, that's cool. And I read it, and I was just enthralled by it. And I've enjoyed the universe ever since. And one of it, the main characters in there quote Sun Tzu: "Know your enemy, know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." We live in an era where you can know everything you want to know about both your position and your opponent's position, and yet it seems to be, maybe it's just my impression, but it just seems to be people are less informed about opposing views.
Yeah,
am I wrong there?
Each side tends to characterize the views of the other, tends to frame them and restate them slightly dishonestly or even very dishonestly. And both sides do that, and both sides need to stop that. Until you can have straightforward, honest, without misrepresentation on either side against one another, we won't get to a point where we can make the compromises we really need to make. We need to figure out what government is really good at and limit government to doing things it's really good at, and to have the government at the right level, be it federal, state, or local, be involved as appropriate to the problem the government proposes to solve. Federalizing everything. This thing in Canada just chills me to the marrow. The banning of handguns. Did you see that idiot Castro banned the sale and distribution of handguns. So he's capping the supply, as he said it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And, capping the market on handguns, whatever that means, capping the market. What an idiot. He doesn't even, anyway.
Yeah, Runkle the Bailey's going to do a detailed breakdown on it. He's a Canadian firearms lawyer, so you can imagine what his inbox is like right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wait for his detailed breakdown on it, because he was promising to do that.
I suspect there will be a lively black market in handguns in Canada, a lively secondary market too, because handguns are going to get very valuable, and the people who own them will start having them get, quote, stolen, end quote. What they'll do is sell them illegally. I mean, Trudeau has just said that this asset that you have in your home that's worth hundreds of dollars is now illegal to sell. Screw you.
Right. That doesn't create a perverse incentive structure. Not at all.
It's perverse.
Well, I know what Scott Adams would be talking about right now. 3D printers. Because it's almost impossible.
Talking about those?
Well, it's almost impossible with modern technology to talk about something like ghost guns, because people are the ability for people to just fabricate things is going to be
in their hands.
Yeah, to have them be durable is going to be a reality fairly soon. Because obviously not many people can smith a gun. But and I'm not advocating YouTube, so Susan, don't get your panties in a wad over this, but I think it's impractical to ban handguns in the same sense that there are chemical ways of people getting an abortion. With an early abortion, like with the abortion pill. There's no way you can ban abortion. There's no way you can ban handguns. All you can do is just make make it more difficult or more expensive or both.
Exactly. Women are going to get abortions, and they're going to get roughly the same number of abortions, whether they're safe and legal or illegal and scary. And
There may be
that's
fewer.
all that happens.
I think
may
it would
fewer,
be,
but it
would be
won't
fewer.
Much. It won't be
Well,
much.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, the states that are going to be the most strict are the states that already have the fewest abortions anyway. So it's a little bit like, you're not going to have nearly the impact that people think there is. But even with that, I think the abortion is a good topic, because I think the American people as a whole have a lot more nuanced view than both sides would really give credit for. Because, again, talking to my family, they'll cite stuff like 70% approve of abortion without kind of digging into the numbers. So I went ahead and did, because I'm a nerd like that. And broadly spaced, most people are totally fine with abortions in the first trimester. And then as time goes on, they get a lot more skeptical. But you have about 10 to 15% of the country that are like, as soon as sperm meets egg, that's it, game over, it's life. And that's not, that's a very minority view. And then you have 20 to 25% that are like, there should be no restrictions on abortion at all at any point, up to the moment of birth. And that's about a 20-25% of, so the middle 60-65% of the country gets lost in the conversation. And it's deeply frustrating. I mean, I think you could get 60% of the country to support a ban on elective abortions after the first trimester, and like failed pregnancy abortions, which I think is an ethically different deal. Save the life of the mother, no restriction on that, and that would get you support of 60% of the country. But of course, we're not going to have that, because we can't have nice things and reach compromise anymore right now. Yeah. Because the extreme edges of the conversation have to dominate the microphone.
Yeah. Well, this is a good opportunity to talk about something we were talking about a moment ago, which is sort of steel manning the position of your opponent. So, for instance, I think, if you were going to take the most charitable interpretation of that 25% who think that late-term abortion up till, the moment of birth, unchallenged, it's totally up to the woman. I suspect most of those people are not literally in favor of chopping up kids. Like a day before they're going to be born. I don't think so. But what I think they have convinced themselves of is if there's any restriction whatsoever, any restriction, any law that's passed, it will just be a slippery slope thing, because they know that in a different circumstance, that's exactly what they would do. We got our first $100 of reparations, then go for the next 1,000, go for the next 10,000, because that's the way they argue. So when they see somebody trying to put any kind of limit on this thing, they have an almost knee-jerk reaction, because they know what they would do in the same situation. So they just go, no, absolutely no restriction whatsoever, ever, under any circumstances. And they end up with these ridiculous bits of testimony where some congressman or senator is asking them, trying to figure out what the limit is. Where would they want to draw the line? And then these people who are not acting honestly, I mean, you can just kind of tell by the look on their face, are trying to come up with this mental masturbation argument for why it's okay to do what they say they're going to do. But I don't honestly think that most of them believe that. Yeah, there's going to be a few whack jobs, mostly, but this is me trying to give the most charitable interpretation of their position.
Sure.
That's well the said. Best I can do, but at least I can do it. That's the thing. People on the left, they don't do that. They just go, you're just a racist.
Yeah, they're constitutionally incapable of even just entertaining the premise of anything that disagrees with their cherished point of view.
Yeah. And you can, speaking of going back to old TV episodes, there's great footage of Thomas Sowell talking to William F. Buckley about poverty and women and pregnancy and children being born out of wedlock. Great conversations, and it's surprising how little has changed since the 1970s and the 1980s. The debate is still almost exactly the same.
You're right. And the poll numbers are almost exactly the same. It's astonishing how like that, that kind of the broad base would get you, not everybody, but it'd get you, half or maybe a touch over half of the country would support kind of, and would be in line with the rest of Western Europe, with the rest of the Western world. That is more or less how the poll numbers shake out. It's about it's about half or okay, and then yeah. So there's compromise to be had if people want to have it, but yeah, I mean on the other side, I mean the people who are the firm meeks egg, I mean that they have the position, rightly or wrongly, that they think that is a new creation, and so who are we to fiddle with that? And I can understand the reality there, but you also don't want to be in a situation where suddenly most miscarriages are suddenly investigated as though they're a murder when they're not, and it's an ugly mess.
Yeah, a blastosphere is not to most people is not the same thing as a human. But
right.
you get into these nuanced discussions about fetal development, and yeah, if you believe that life begins at conception, then as I've said before on the air, then there's really not much discussion you can have. If that's somebody's position, then that's going to be their position.
Harry, do you remember what William F. Buckley's line was about that? He says,
off the top of my head.
He said, "Well, is it that it is not human or that it is not alive?" And it's both
now
human and alive.
Interesting point. Yep.
That is the thing. If you wanted to argue against that, again, because I always like a good argument. If you wanted to argue against that, you would simply bring up the statistics about the number of fertilized eggs that don't implant in a uterus and aren't carried to term naturally. And if you want to claim that it's God's will that all fertilized eggs turn into humans that are born, nature doesn't really show us that as a pattern. So the thing is, when you make arguments about knowing what God's will is, you end up in this position of, well, first of all, it seems incredible to somebody who's not part of that club, to an outsider. It seems incredibly arrogant to me. I love it when somebody who's a Christian's telling me I'm being arrogant. And it's like, well, I'm not the one claiming to know what the creator of the universe did or thinks. I don't claim to know God's mind. So please enlighten me as to how arrogant I am. But it's troublesome. You basically argue yourself into a corner when you use just an argument like life begins at conception. But if it's a religious belief, then it's like, well, you've taken it out of the realm of discussion. That's your belief. Okay. It's fine. You need to be respectful of people. But if you want to make an argument, if you want to be like William Lane Craig and you want to argue about, like get into apologetics and then try to get into a technical argument about this sort of thing, then that's the kind of argument you go up against.
Yeah. I think I lost my train of thought for a second. Part of this is a more recent technological problem, because there was once a time where we're like quickening was the standard. Like once you could feel the baby kick, then it's alive, and for sure a baby's coming.
Why isn't that called the kickening?
I don't know.
Okay, just registered my complaint.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't use quickening instead. Well, I think the impression was until you could feel the baby moving, then the baby wasn't alive. Like it's kind of the switch got turned on at that point. And then as technology's gotten better and we can see into the womb, which of course nobody would be able to do back then.
Now we have a womb with a view. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Right, with ultrasounds and Oh man.
See what I did there?
Yes, I did. That's great. Then suddenly you don't have that kind of like seemingly non-arbitrary line. And the nice thing about conception, or maybe even implantation, because I've seen that nuance as well, that's kind of a non-arbitrary line. Also, birth, first breath, that's a non-arbitrary line. But I don't think either one is particularly reasonable. I do like what Skep's William F. Buckley quote. I'm gonna steal that one, because it's really good.
You should always steal Buckley quotes. I mean, as a general rule.
Good point. Good point. The way I've been thinking about it in recent days is we usually we consider something dead, a human being dead, when their brain activity stops. And so I'm fully willing to keep that consistent, and then consider alive when brain activity starts.
That's the line I use. It's 21 weeks, by the way.
Is that 21 weeks? I thought it was much earlier than that.
You could go back to, well, if you're talking about organized brainwaves, like, this is a human consciousness, you can measure that. And last time I checked, it was 21 weeks. If you wanted to be completely safe, you could go 19 or 20, but before that, there's nothing that looks like human thought.
Well, but you got a voluntary muscle movement at 16 weeks.
Well, lots of living things can move. That doesn't make them human.
Well, but it's still a human that's alive.
Not by the definition.
I can't think of an ethical reason to have an abortion after voluntary movement can start.
Well, the question is the movement voluntary? So are we talking about the autonomous nervous system, just kind of some sort of involuntary response happening or not? If you had somebody on a bed,
well, that would be hard,
and they were brain damaged, right? But if they're brain damaged on a bed, and you're trying to decide whether to take them off life support, is this person still alive, or is it just something that's keeping their body alive, but the mind is gone? You can measure that, right, in the brain. You can do the same thing with a fetus, and if you're going to use that as the number, it's like, 20 weeks, 21 weeks is the number I've seen. And if I'm wrong about that, just tell me I'm wrong and give me a different source. Okay. But let's admit that there's a number, right? There's a number, and it's probably not in the first trimester. And most people, I think, intuitively know this. And I think most people are instinctively very, very uncomfortable, if not completely revolted, at the idea of late-term abortion, if it's not a medical necessity. People's natural, instinctive, ethical values are often really good. Like you don't sleep with your relatives. You don't assault women. You don't do this. You don't murder. You don't chop up babies when they're 9 months in the womb. There's things you just don't do that you're not supposed to feel good about. And I think our natural and innate sense of decency serves us pretty well in this capacity. I think it's reflected in that number that you're talking about. The 60% that pretty much agree about this, and they don't fall in either of the extremes. I'm actually agreeing with you. It's just I'm doing it very slowly and inefficiently.
We can quibble about what the final line should be. Whether it be voluntary, arm and hand and feet movements, which would probably be like, 15, 16 weeks, or, brain, more developed brain. I mean, we can argue about that a little bit. But yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page that there's at some point where, it's, the choice should be taken out of the mother's hands. I mean, some of the argumentation for the Supreme Court, they'll bring up the obvious, what we would all agree with, saving the life of the mother, which I would term as a failed pregnancy. because that's kind of what it is. I mean, that, and then they'll go into, you know, job changes, relationship changes, and stuff like that for arguing for, later abortions. And I'm sitting there going, I don't think that should be legal. I mean, if your husband leaves you when you're 8 months pregnant, yeah, he's a dick. It doesn't mean you get to commit murder now.
Well, I mean, I guess if you took it on a case-by-case basis, the main defense for this is, who gets to decide? Who is in the best position to decide? Is it the mother or is it the state? And once you decide what your position is on that, then you need to apply that to a lot of other things. Trans kids, should the parents decide or should the state decide? Who gets to decide if the kid gets his testicles chopped off or goes through the hormone blockers? Because we grant a lot of latitude to parents.
Well,
for better or worse, bad decisions will occasionally get made.
But they're not incompetent. See, here's the thing. The state has no business in this conversation until it can present a pressing need, on the basis of a law being violated. And so the state is should be out of the picture, in my libertarian world, effectively, completely. But and there should be strong cultural values that keep people from needing abortions in the first place. In my perfect world.
I agree with that for sure.
But one of the things I never hear from the pro-life side is, how does the woman who is pregnant, what is her interest, and where does it diminish to insignificant? Is it ever greater than the interest of the created life to go forward? Is anything that is going to happen to that woman as a result of this pregnancy, is that worth a consideration against the life of the child that's inside her, however, regardless of how it got created? I never hear a discussion of that from the pro-life side. I'm not asking for discussion of that now.
Sure.
It's the way that they talk to each other. They just launch their salvos of their, perfect demagogic model, and at one another, talk past each other, and nothing. There's no discussion. There's two people reading their position papers at each other at full volume. Nobody's trying to understand the other side. I never hear the pro-life people try and understand that side of the pro-choice argument, and you never hear pro-choice people honestly treat with the idea of the slippery part about, when does this become a human being? I always said that with abortion, it kind of works like this, and I actually got my Baptist minister. I actually discussed this with him, and he didn't have a good answer to this. Imagine you have your Aunt Susie, and you have another person who is pregnant. Okay, there's that person who is pregnant and Aunt Susie, and you can you're given a choice by you. Just accept the hypothetical that you have to sacrifice one of those lives. One of those lives is a 4-cell blastocyst in a woman that could be evacuated in a DNC, and it's 4 cells large. The other one is Aunt Susie. Is the right way to decide which life is taken, the 4-cell thing or Aunt Susie? Is the right way to decide by flipping a coin, in which Aunt Susie has a 50% of getting her head blown off? Or is it to just say, hey, common sense tells you that Aunt Susie is a life that is more worth preserving than 4 created cells. And I've posed that to people and had people come back and vehemently defend the idea that the baby is the important thing, and Aunt Susie's lived her life. It's just amazing what that what that is, but where that takes you. The problem is that it's not all life is the same. And there's a very tricky thing that happens during the pregnancy where it goes from that 4-cell thing to something that is too complicated and way too alive to with any conscience at all terminate, but when does that happen? And how do you error, since it's going to be a statistical spread, how do you err on the side of caution there? I don't have the answer to that. But that's the
it's
problem,
always fun when the government gets involved in we're going to protect you from yourself.
Yeah.
Or,
Thank you.
sort of situations. I mean, it's not like we don't do this, right?
Yes.
It's we prevent people from driving before a certain age. We prevent them from joining the military. We prevent them from getting married. There's lots of things that we do in the name of protecting people from exploitation and all sorts of other kinds of harm. In a perfect world, people would just make good decisions, and 13-year-old girls would tell Jerry Lee Lewis, "Sorry, mister, you're kind of old and creepy. Go away." Wasn't he the one that married the 13-year-old?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, screw that guy.
Weren't they related?
I'm sorry?
Weren't they related?
They were cousins.
I don't know.
They were first cousins. He married.
Oh, now you're just adding creepy on top of creepy. So they were blood relatives?
Yes, I believe she was his first cousin.
Ick.
Goodness gracious.
See, you're just making it worse, Johnny.
Oof.
So, if you'll pardon the pivot for a moment, we have this natural aversion to stuff. Like, everybody's really grossed out by the whole Woody Allen thing, marrying his stepkid. I mean, that just rubs a lot of us the wrong way. If Serenity wasn't muted, she'd be going, ew, right now. I'm fairly sure. It is you. I was surprised that, was it Gloria Graham? There was like a huge scandal involving her back in the day. I mean, she was a pretty big star at the time. And she ended up basically hooking up with her stepson. And it kind of destroyed her entire career. I started looking at all these. Yeah, I started looking at all these old school scandals.
As it should.
And man, they used to have way better scandals in Hollywood than just this. You think this Johnny Depp Amber Turd thing is entertaining? Man, the scandals that they used to have back in old timey Hollywood were pretty amazing. Like, I don't know if people have heard about like how Lupe Velez died. Are you acquainted with the star movie Lupe Velez from the 30s? Well, her career kind of went poorly. And so she staged this elaborate suicide that she had put together. So she had like flowers around her, and she had silk sheets, and she's wearing this white satin gown and all this sort of stuff. And I think she ate like a bunch of enchiladas or something before she took a huge handful of pills she was going to off herself and try to go down in history for doing this. Unfortunately, the pills didn't really go well with the enchiladas, and she started feeling queasy. So she walked into the bathroom, tripped and stumbled, and died with her head stuck in the toilet. So instead of being remembered as like this sort of, she went out, all dolled up in her white gown, surrounded by flowers and stuff. She ended up being the woman who died because she tripped and hit her head on the inside of the toilet bowl. You know, it's like, well, you achieved one goal. You ended up being famous, but you didn't really quite pull it off the way you were planning on doing it. And old-time Hollywood is just full of stories like this, like weird shit that happens. And I don't think the modern stars are really pulling their weight.
Gloria Graham had an affair with her 13-year-old stepson.
And that went on later, too. Yeah.
Yep. And then she ended up marrying someone else. She ended up marrying Cy Howard after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think by that time she'd had her first kid, Timothy, I think.
Yeah, she married a bunch of them. In fact, a bunch of these old-timey starlets married a bunch of people. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner, she was a hot mess. I'm trying to think of Paulette Goddard. There were a bunch of these old-timey stars that just had some pretty darn interesting lives. Paulette Goddard was married to Charlie Chaplin, but I guess we weren't quite sure she was because they just sort of claimed it happened when they were in China, and nobody was quite sure if it was real. And so there was a lot of people tittering about the fact that they were living together and all that sort of nonsense. But yeah, there were great stories from old-time Hollywood. I just don't feel like Amber Turd and Johnny Depp measure up compared to the old school stuff. Like, you can have a field day. Yeah, well, you can have a field day just talking about what the hell happened to Sal Mineo or Natalie Wood or all these other things. It's just like the modern stuff is just so not interesting. Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. I mean, anything involving a Kardashian. I mean, who cares? Not me. Not even interesting.
I think it's because so much of it's public now. Because a lot of these scandals, a lot of people didn't find out until years later. Like, nobody found out about Glory, because I was reading an article on her. Nobody found out that she had an affair with a 13-year-old until after she married him when he got older. And that
when
was
he was 19 or something, yeah.
Yeah, and then she was like, no, everyone yawned when I married his father, but now they have a problem with this. It's like, sweetheart, really?
Like, whoa, time out. But I think that's a good point, because that Starting made is that these things could fester for a lot longer and kind of boil, slow burn. So yeah, that might be something to that, where they're not as interesting. They get chopped off at the knees early.
What's also the fact that like these big Hollywood stars used to have this entire studios protecting them, because they were signed individualistically to studios, and the studios had to protect their image to a point. Otherwise, they would get hit. Now, with social media, studios can't take that chance anymore in case someone's going to end up in bed with a teenager or have a drug bust or something like that. So they can't do that anymore. And the big managers and publicists don't do it because they've stupidly got under the impression that any publicity is good publicity. So it's like stuff's just not allowed to grow to the point that it once was because of all the social media and just arrogance of Hollywood celebrities.
Well, the Epstein trial is close, don't you think? I mean, it's like the closest thing to like an old-time big scandal.
Yeah, and then I can never say her damn name, Ghislaine Maxwell?
Ghislaine?
Yeah, it's something. Hers, too. Like, those are the closest we got in modern stuff, but yeah, like the Johnny Depp and Amber Turd thing, like, one, I acknowledge the people who say that Johnny is a little bit of a, I acknowledge that. That doesn't mean she had the right to do anything to him. That doesn't mean he deserved it. Doesn't mean anything. I don't care about his own mental state unless he somehow provoked it. But once again, she's a grown-ass adult. She could have walked away. And I don't believe for a second he provoked anything. So it's like, it doesn't matter. It matters what she did and what she lied about.
And there was a gal on Twitter who she's like, I don't care about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard anymore. And having that feeling is all right. Because I honestly could give two shits.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to like play yourself off as someone who's like, we're all sick of it. Who cares? Just stop that statement right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go on with your life. Just go, I'm done. And just walk away. You don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to post it on the internet. Just go, you know what? Never mind. And walk away. That's all you got to do.
Well, and then she went on to pretty much, say that Johnny Depp, since he was out playing music with some guy, I don't remember the name. 6 months later, he's like, he was never abused.
Yeah,
Like-
because that abused people never go out and just do stuff that they enjoy to get away from the crazy person at home. Never at all.
Well, it's like Amber Heard, after she complained about being abused by Johnny Depp, went to a Hollywood outing the day after. So it's like,
And she covered up her bruise. Oh, it wasn't really there to begin with, but she covered up her bruise. Oh. But yeah, no, it's like I just get the Cliff Notes version with the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial from everybody else, because I don't want to watch the live streams, because then I'm just going to lose a little bit of faith in humanity as it just goes on and on and on and on.
Well, it's almost
Yeah,
over.
this-
I mean, it's in deliberations now, so
Thank
within the next day or so, it'll
stop.
all be
God.
wrapped up in a nice little bow.
Yay.
Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Harry, what is that?
It helps if I unmute. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, this is. Did you want to actually hear this, Skep? You've seen this, haven't you, Skep?
oh yeah, that's the
Oh yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah, this guy's
I've
this
made
guy's my
reference-
spirit animal.
I've
Crazy! Oh God, the crazy hot.
He's gonna show you the dating zone, the Mary,
Yeah.
and
I've seen the
avoid-
meme. I haven't seen the actual presentation.
Oh Lord,
That is
no.
fantastic. I gotta look this up.
Oh,
This
it's
is
the
awesome.
greatest thing ever. Because you just the point is, where is Amber Heard on this graph? That's the thing. So she's over toward the right side on the hot thing. And okay, don't argue with me. I hear people in the chat who already going, "No, she's not that hot. She's repulsive." Okay, it's not about her behavior. It's
Yeah.
just about her semi-objective hotness
Yeah.
back when she was hotter. Okay.
Yeah, but say,
Yeah.
statistically speaking, it is just about physically she is what is considered hot. Just get over
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So if superficial people, have her hot, she's definitely not in the fun zone.
No.
That's the thing.
well, I mean,
Anyway.
if your idea of fun is taking a bump of coke while you're on trial, by
Well,
all
the thing
means.
is, like, she could have been in the fun zone had she been one of the good bisexual girls, because then they could have had the whole lesbian threesome thing that everybody always, like, every dude wants. So, but she just went over. She went.
No,
too
some
far.
of us know our limitations and only want to disappoint one woman at a time. Not every guy.
In the word
The-
of functional,
the
9 hot, 12 crazy.
I love the danger zone.
Danger zone. This is where the danger zone is, where we're talking about. It's like, because remember, the y-axis is crazy, and she's pretty
Yeah.
high on that. So she's
Oh,
kind of
she's
up there
way
in the
in the
danger zone.
No, she Amber Heard is definitely in the danger zone.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
The
If-
weird thing is, I wonder if it's, and this is not meant to try to excuse her behavior, because I'm not, because I don't think mental illness is a reason to excuse behavior. But it's like, at least everything I've heard about her parents and their interactions and the fact that they sided with Johnny, it's like her parents seem, at least on the surface, to be okay. Where did the nuck and futs come from?
Okay, I'm going to turn the audio on for just a second, because this
All
is
right,
where it
go.
starts to get good.
Can't hear anything, Harry.
Yeah, you got to share the audio, I think.
Oh, you know me and all of my many problems.
That's why I said something. I was like, I'm gonna wait.
There we are. Can you hear it now?
Nope.
Nope, still not.
Oh, I'm absolutely
Would you-
useless.
What did you break, Harry? What did you break?
Unmute layer. Okay.
Oh, it's
Oh,
never
well.
dull.
Oh well, I suck. Never
No,
mind.
you don't. Stop it. Technology is just so confusing.
No,
Can you
I
send
like
me a link
his.
to that in DM on Discord?
I absolutely can do that, because the thing is, underneath the date zone, somewhere in sort of the not very crazy but super hot zone, he's going to make a joke. He's going to say, you know, this is what we call the unicorn zone, you know, where he's going to say, that's not a chick, that's a dude. You know, you better be.
That's not a chick, that's a dude.
She's totally chill and super hot. No, that's a dude.
Just accept it.
Dude looks like a lady.
Yeah, exactly.
Aerosmith knew.
I remember the music video for that song.
Oh man, that's a good one. It was when Joe Perry and Stevie were not speaking. That's why he's over on the side.
It's like a lot of the old Aerosmith videos are amazing.
Oh yeah,
Love in an Elevator.
Love an Elevator. I was just gonna say that concert video. That's awesome.
Yeah, that one's good. The Armageddon soundtrack, like video for that was amazing too.
Yeah.
So in making a Steven Tyler joke about some old lady who was talking about getting an abortion and getting that sucker ripped out of you, I discovered some pretty disturbing stuff about Steven Tyler. Because everyone decided that they were going to like inundate me because they're like, oh, that's not Steven Tyler. Yeah, no shit. It's called a joke.
Work with me, people.
Fuck off.
Still no sound, Harry.
I know,
Okay,
but at least we get the video this way.
This is the unicorn zone. He's getting ready to talk
Yeah.
about
Yes.
unicorn zone.
I had similar
One of them,
experience on Twitter
Yeah.
about a month ago about Bubble
That's the
Wallace.
life zone.
Oh,
There's the date zone, the wife zone.
Yeah. But here's
Hot,
the
but not
joke
too
that's coming
crazy.
up.
Yeah.
Very small. Very, very small.
This is just the best thing.
I love the fact that he looks like just a regular like community college professor,
Mm-hmm.
which makes this even funnier to me because it's just like he looks so serious. Like
Are you
he's
going to
taking-
post that link for everybody?
I did.
Gary?
I did.
Oh,
I put
thank
it in the chat already.
No, thank you. Unicorns. Jeez. No, dude. That's
It's got
dude.
2.6 million views.
What did you
Awesome.
do this time, Camel?
Oh, that just makes me happy.
Ah, the unicorn. Although
I'm surprised I didn't get one of those today. Hey, Camel. I keep waiting for one.
See, the problem with that assassin is that I'd have to be attracted to women in order for this to work for me. I'm aware
There
to
is
save
a-
some guys' lives. I understand
Good
that,
point.
but
Well, there is sort of a woman who tries to do the woman's equivalent of it, and I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. It's not very funny.
I didn't. Think
She
it would be.
tried, but she failed.
Well, the thing is like with guys, women. I don't want to say they can hide their crazy, but men are usually a little bit more forgiving of a woman's crazy to a point, which is the reason why they can usually get so far. Look at Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Women, like men, don't do the psychological crazy. It's usually the physical crazy, and that's usually when people start going, "You need to get out." So they at least publicly have more backing of people going, "Get out," so they have a chance to leave. Men don't, because they're always just told, "Oh, you're just thinking it's worse than what it is. She's not that bad. She's so nice to me," that kind of stuff. So it's there's the dichotomy of it, is that, and so it's that kind of stuff. So that's the reason why it makes that very, very difficult. Of course, I'm also I'm not a pick me girl. I'm not a guy's girl. I am a country motherfucker.
I was so tolerant of my first long-term relationship, cough 3 months, because I'm not a guy who can just walk out and pick up the first woman he sees crossing his path.
Hot piece of ass.
So I went on a date with a gal who, and this is very romantic comedy. I was working at a balloon shop, and I was
Nice.
my coworker's boyfriend's sister came in, and I was watching her, and I was tying balloons by placing the balloon between my waist and the table, and tying the balloon, putting it up, tying the balloon, putting it up, and I had made some sandbags, and sand and balloons don't mix.
Nope.
So as I'm tying a balloon, I press a little close to the balloon, and it catches a piece of sand. The balloon pops, snaps me in the crotch.
Oh.
And I immediately
Whoops.
like, oh God. And the first reaction is to curl over.
Yeah.
Well, the table was there.
Oh,
So
no.
I curled down and smacked my face against the table, and I just fell to the ground.
Boom.
And like everyone comes rushing over, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Like,
I meant to do that.
It's just a flesh wound.
they're like, what the hell happened? And I'm just like, I'll explain later. I'm not talking in front of you guys.
Yeah.
Like, stupid. It was stupid.
But she thought it was cute.
That should have been your first warning.
Yeah. And then on our first date, we got in a fight over a Reuben.
The sandwich or the penis?
Yes.
Oh,
A
the sandwich.
sandwich.
Which?
Over a sandwich.
Oh,
How
second
can you
red
get-
flag.
How can you get in a fight over a sandwich?
Did you ask her to make it for you?
No. At the restaurant where we were double dating with my coworker and her brother. I had mentioned, a Reuben having sauerkraut on it.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, well, not all Reubens have sauerkraut. And I go,
It's kind of part of a Reuben.
yeah, that's what makes it a Reuben.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not what. And I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like 3 months later, I was planning on breaking up with her, and she broke up with me, and I'm just like, how could you?
You bitch.
And she's like, well, I didn't think you'd feel that wrong that strongly about it. I'm like, I don't know.
It's one of those things. If it's one of the like cute arguments where it's not people getting very mad about it, it's okay. But when someone like takes it personally, Reuben doesn't have. What are you talking about? Reuben doesn't have this on it. That's when it's like.
It's what a weird hill to die on.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like,
And-
crazy.
And
Dying on the Reuben Hill.
the weird part about me is like I am an antagonist when it comes to shit arguments.
Yeah.
So like I will keep it going for as long as I can, which is a very bad way
Yes.
to keep a relationship going.
Yes.
So
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
the fact that we were still dating after that was a miracle in itself.
Some people do just like to argue, though. I knew this guy who was just like incredibly contrary, and he would argue about pretty much anything, no matter what position you'd take. He would take the opposite. I knew that people like that theoretically existed, but it was really shocking when I actually met one. This was a few years ago, so I mean, it took over a half century for me to run into somebody who was actually like that.
Good time.
And I got into a conversation with him one time. I actually decided that I actually kind of thought he was a pretty decent guy because he was actually pretty okay. aside from being an annoying, time-wasting twit. He was telling me about a game they used to play when he was a kid in Iowa called Tackle Bucket. I said, okay, I've never heard of this game. What is Tackle Bucket? And he said, well, you sit on a bucket, and then everybody runs over and tackles you. And I said, okay, I don't really understand how this is a game. No, it's totally fun. Then somebody else sits on the bucket, and you all tackle him. And I said, did you play this a lot when you were a kid? He said, yeah. I said, well, this kind of explains a lot of the conversations that you and I have had over the last couple of years. Because Tackle Bucket does not sound like a fun game to me. And it's kind of prejudiced me against Iowa in general. I mean, other than the fact... Iowa's, I mean, the only person I've really met from Iowa that I've talked to for any length of time is this one guy, and I can't say he's the best ambassador. Tackle Bucket.
I don't care. You can't blame an entire state. Just write off an entire state because of one idiot.
I just did.
Can't you?
No. No, you can't.
Now, we do have some minions that are from Iowa.
You can't assume that he's the only person in Iowa whose group of friends didn't realize they can dodge when someone runs at them.
You can't dodge when you're sitting on the bucket. See,
Right.
that's why Tackle Bucket sounds like a really terrible way to waste time.
The only childhood game I had that I know everyone else played was Spotlight Tag.
Spotlight Tag, okay.
Yeah.
I can't say I played that.
Well, some people have different names for it, but it's literally you go out at night, one person has a flashlight, and then you then you play tag or hide and seek and you have to get them with the flashlight and say their name. So you have to flash them with the light, so it's Spotlight Tag.
I played that.
Yeah. See? Everybody has different
Friendship
names
tag.
for it.
Friendship tag's kind of fun. I haven't
Yeah.
done that in a while.
Heck, I remember being like 14 and 15 playing hide and seek in the country. That's fun. Because I can hide some places.
We were pretty easy to amuse when I was a kid. Over in Belgium, about 1959, 1960, we would just get across a road, like just a narrow lane from each other. It would be about the width of one lane of traffic on a highway, about that width, away from each other, and throw chestnuts at each other, which, basically throwing a golf ball at each other's head, and with the resulting mayhem. And when there weren't any chestnuts on the ground, we would go to that place and pick up stones and throw them at each other. That was our idea of a good time.
All right, I'm David. You go stand over there and be Goliath.
Ding!
This was more the way it was like long range dodgeball with rocks.
With pain. Just pain.
It was a brutal laboratory for correcting mistakes.
You get pretty immediate feedback.
Really, the feedback loop is extremely tight.
I once did something which I think you will admire for its capitalist spirit and its almost Sora Luna levels of evil. When I was a little kid, I took a water balloon and I gave it to somebody who I knew hated somebody else at the park, and said, "Hey, here's a water balloon. Why don't you go throw it at that guy? You don't like him." And he says, "I don't mind if I do." And so he threw it at this guy, and then I gave a water balloon to that guy, and he threw it at the other guy, and then I showed up with a box of water balloons and sold them for $0.05 a piece.
Harry.
I'm not kidding.
I know you're not kidding, but we have to
Wow.
talk about your level of
This was 3rd grade.
why are you not like
that
a
sounds
multi-billionaire at this point?
I started my own war and then became an arms merchant.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna stop myself. I'm not gonna say it.
it's
Yeah.
creating your own demand.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I enjoyed it. I once wrote a contract when I was a kid. I was trying to make a like a set of club rules. I started a club
Lord.
when I was in 5th grade,
First thing
and
you gotta have is rules.
and I wrote up a bunch of rules, but I wrote it sort of like the U.S. Constitution, but I sneakily put it together in such a way that I was always in charge of everything. It just looked like a democracy. God, I wish I could find a copy of that.
Harry, honey. I'm so glad you weren't born in like Russia, because then you'd be worse than Britain.
I am really evil.
You're an evil son.
Harry would be a political officer in the KGB.
I'm so glad you didn't. I'm so glad you didn't go into politics, because then you
Yes.
have to assassinate your butt.
Yes.
Like,
Thank you. Please face wall.
Yeah. How compelling, comrade. Please.
All right,
face wall.
subjects. I have a science experiment we need to work with.
all right, I'm going to give you a water bullet. No, I'm going to give you a nuke, and I'm going to give you a nuke, because you all hate each other. All right. Who
Yeah.
wants to buy nukes?
Well, that's why I was watching the first Iron Man movie thinking, yeah, he doesn't seem so unsympathetic. You know, at the beginning,
Yeah.
when he was just selling arms to everybody. I mean, somebody's going to sell the arms. It does.
Yeah. I had no problem with what Iron Man did at the beginning of the first Iron Man movie. I was like, no, it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
people are going to start wars anyway. Might as well make sure someone has weapons.
Yeah.
I ain't going to judge.
I mean, if we're going to burn fossil fuels anyway until we all reach our Mr. Fusion nuclear utopia, might as well just burn our own oil, right?
Like, meh.
Yeah.
No judgment. I don't judge you. Don't judge you, Tony Stark. I love you.
I mean,
Don't
if the
judge you.
people are going to have wars all around the world, they might as well be using our weapons.
Exactly. So this way, if they try to focus at us, we can turn them off. No, 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 no. I still
They
have
get
the
to buy
button.
those. They get to buy those weapons with cheap dollars. Biden is making our dollars cheaper and cheaper by the day.
I mean, every country's currency is getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. It's all turning to crap. So it's like, as long as we're going with everybody else, woohoo!
Yeah,
Well-
I do find military history to be pretty interesting, but I think if you wanted to dabble in military history and you didn't want to become an expert on it, but you just wanted to get a rough idea of kind of how all the moving parts work, you could do worse than just studying the Falklands conflict.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because it contains all of the it contains sort of an object lesson for every single thing you need to know about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from the role of submarines to logistics to morale to just the politics of it. If you actually study the Falklands conflict in any kind of detail, it is an amazing story.
What it took to get a British bomber there in the air.
Yeah, they had to refuel those Vulcans a few
Three
times.
times.
Yeah,
3 times on the way down. Yeah. Yeah. They and if you miss your rendezvous, you're in the sea.
Nope. Well, too late.
You're in the
Goodbye.
ocean and there's no help for you for a while.
yeah.
Okay, I
It's,
love you. Bye bye.
You know, those Vulcans weren't exactly put together amazingly well. It's not an amazingly durable airplane.
You saying that 70s
look
British
at them.
aerospace had problems? Skep.
Yeah, nothing but problems. I'm sure
They're
everybody's
cool
seen
looking though. They
the-
were cool looking.
you know, you just the Vulcan pilot who's just flying along, no problem. All of a sudden, his plane just disintegrates around him. That was literally a structural failure on a plane that had been in service for a while. British.
Bless their hearts.
It's a changing place. I confess to have some sympathy with people who believe that Britain is losing a little bit of its identity, or has given up a little bit of its identity with the influx of immigrants who come in, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're not evil or anything like that. They have different sets of customs, beliefs, and they're, you know, you get. I could always rely on British people to be British. Now, British people a lot of them are Muslim A lot of them want to live in closed communities away from Westerners.
And yet they moved to the West. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well,
It's
yeah,
like-
because it's safer here. That's why they come here.
Oh, I know.
You know, it's not. Everybody thinks it's for the opportunity. It's mostly about safety.
Yeah. God dang it, Hellcat. 9 out of 10 did
As long as we're having fun here.
Yeah. The IT crowd, always fun.
I
The
love
joke
watching
is
the
that the
bloopers.
fire extinguisher caught fire and it's got a sticker on the side that says made in Britain.
Yep.
Oh,
I love watching the bloopers for
That
IT
just
crowd.
makes
They're
me
great
happy.
too.
Oh.
Of course, it's on fire. The fire
Yeah.
extinguisher's on fire. It's just not right.
Have you seen the IT crowd, Skep?
No, I have not.
You might actually enjoy it.
Is this a TV show?
It is a TV show.
Yep.
I will check it out.
Only-
The IT crowd.
Yeah.
Not hard
It
to
only
remember.
ran for 4 seasons, I think. It was 4 seasons?
It did. Well,
Yeah.
there was a 5th season, sort of, but don't pay any attention to that.
Yeah.
It was like
And they
1 or
weren't
2
very
episodes
long
or something.
seasons either. They were like 12
Looks like
episodes,
it's
I think.
back in the 80s.
No, it was,
I thought it was a little later than that.
yeah,
was
it's
it the
early
80s?
2000s. No, well, it was
No,
early
it
2000s.
couldn't be.
No, I mean that it's set in the 80s.
I don't
No,
think it
it's
was-
not the 80s because they have the internet.
Yeah, because they have
Okay,
the
so
so
they've got
it's
there. Okay.
90s or early 2000s, if I remember right. Because I know
In
it
fact,
came out.
in one episode, they basically try to bamboozle the person who they have talk to customers, and they claim that the internet is
Yeah.
basically this box.
Oh man, that reminds me of a customer service story at Albertsons. I had this lady come in and yell at me because she couldn't figure out the website wouldn't work. She had her security settings set wrong, so the website didn't work. And she came into the store to yell at me about it.
2006.
Just going, okay, well, let me open up my magical door to the internet and fix your problem for you. That was a bizarre conversation.
I was just that's where the joke, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on, had been going on for a little bit before that, but it got big because of, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Yeah, the IT
Okay.
crowd is a pretty darn good show. It's pretty silly.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, there's some great episodes in there. One of the characters, he decides that the vibrate function on his cell phone isn't powerful enough, so one of the nerds turns it up to 11. So it's just this insane level of vibration, and then they have to go to a funeral, and the hilarious hijinks ensue.
Oh.
Well,
All right.
And then like one of them ends up dating a magician. It's the one woman in the cast, like the regular woman, and that turns into insanity.
Yeah, good times.
Well, anyway, I want to thank chat for coming out and listening to us, and thank my panel for being a part of this. The time of the evening has come. We need to close the show. We've been going for a couple of hours, but thanks for coming out and listening to us, and thank you guys for hanging with me, my friends here on the panel. But we're going to close it out for a Tuesday night and now Wednesday morning here in Midlothian, Texas. So for all the minions, thanks for joining us. We'll do it again next week, and don't forget the big Saturday show with Harry in charge. But for tonight, the zoo is closed. Good night, everybody.